welcome to our attendees. Currently, there are people still signing in. Today, we are joined by a terrific panel of speakers from the four corners of the world and different corners of Australia. Basically, we're here to discuss a topic I think that is close to everybody's heart, and that is how are we going to rebound out of where we are at the moment. Joining us from Bangkok in Thailand is Jonathan Wigley. Jonathan is somewhat of a celebrity hotelier in that country, and he founded HS I think about 10 or 12 years ago, and he has expanded it rapidly across Asia and also across the world. So we're very happy to have the talented Mr. Wigley with us today. Next, we have the guru of upselling, Vijesh, who is the head of APAC for Oki. Oki, of course, is a very well-known, very well-established, quirky and fun, but very effective upselling tool. And Vijesh will share with you her insights and understanding of the very important upsell side of hoteling. Amit joins us from Brisbane. He is the head of APAC for and Oceania for OTA Insight. OTA Insight, of course, are a pioneering and extremely popular rate and demand tool. This is something that has taken the industry by storm over the last few years, and we are very privileged to have Amit with us. So thanks for joining. If you're in Southeast Asia and you don't know who Fabian Bartnik is, you've been living under a rock probably. Fabian is somewhat of an industry guru in the sense of his knowledge of revenue management. What he doesn't know probably isn't worth knowing. And in recent times, he founded a fantastic product called Infinito, which is really redefining some of that revenue management space. So thank you so much for joining us all the way from Germany. And last and but least, Shane Mansell, Shane the Mohawk Mansell, is joining us from the US. He has been with ResNet for over a decade. He is a specialist in GDS, and he is basically joined us at 2 a.m. in US time. So thank you for staying awake or getting up, whichever it is. Thank you, Shane. Welcome. Talking about today, we're going to be talking about the big rebound, and the topics that most interest hoteliers right now really are: what do we do to try and survive? What do we do to try and revive? And what do we do when our guests arrive? Okay, so we're looking really to drill down into some of the key things that hoteliers can do to ensure that they basically maximize every opportunity available to them. Now, obviously, the COVID situation has brought a great deal of adversity, but in the same token, out of adversity comes opportunity. And hotels are complicated beasts. Pricing, operations, all of those things need a lot of consideration and care. And for that reason, we've pulled together a really red hot panel of people to share their thoughts and to share their ideas with you, and even some of the things that they've been doing in recent times. So with no further ado, I'd like to start with Jonathan. I've got a question for you here, and I think the panel, the participants will be interested to get your feedback on this. So, opportunity from adversity. What key steps has your business taken operationally to become more efficient and prepare for the future?
Well, thanks for the question, Devin, and thanks for having us, or for having me on. I think, firstly, we have to understand with the hospitality industry, and specifically the hotel sector, we are traditionally very slow on evolution. We're almost traditionalists in a lot of ways. So I think our partners and colleagues in other elements of the greater travel and tourism sector maybe have evolved a bit faster than we have. Maybe part of it's complacency. If it doesn't work, don't fix it. And I think if we broke down evolution, we can kind of break down into a few aspects. One would be revenue related items, service related items, product, and costs. So those are the kind of four things that we'd be focused on. I think revenue, service, and product, the evolution has been relatively good, whether pre-COVID or during COVID. I think where we never really had any kind of revolution was really on the cost side of our business, especially in this part of the world. Obviously, we've got hotels in Europe and in other parts of the world that have gone through this evolution through necessity. So what we did, by mid last year, we had taken all the short-term measures related to surviving COVID in our properties. But we decided internally, we thought, well, this is going to be longer than we hope, the impacts of the pandemic. So we should look at what we can do to make us not survive, but thrive long term. That was the objective. So mid last year, we kind of gathered up and we kind of analyzed, and we decided to focus on costs and the structure of costs in our properties, because we felt that was the segment that hadn't really been evolved at all. So we kind of grouped together or bundled together three main objectives that we wanted to find a solution for all three. One was guest experience. Two was cost effectiveness and cost efficiency. Third one, which was a problem for a long time, was attraction and retention of talent, right? So what we decided to do is look, how could we make some actions that could address those three issues? And so what my geniuses came up with is we looked at our organizational structure. In the hotel game, payroll is always our biggest fixed cost. Always has been, always will be. So we decided the basic structure of a hotel in terms of organization hadn't changed in hundreds of years, departments. So basically what we decided to do, and we've started to implement this in our existing hotels and will in our new, we trimmed down all the departments and consolidated them. So in essence, we end up with a services team and an administration team. And then within those teams, we look at which roles need to be specialized, i.e. chefs, and which can be shared. So I can work a shift in breakfast or a few hours in breakfast. I can do a shift on the front desk, maybe a bit on concierge, because in essence, the core skill sets are the same. So we went through that process and we found that we could we could address the cost. A guest experience, you're dealing with the same employee throughout your experience because they're working everywhere. So there's a benefit to that. It also helped us reduce operating hours to the operating hours where we're making money in our facilities, because before the facilities were run based on the shifts of the employees. So we kind of bundled all this together, and then obviously the net result is this: we need less staff, less employees. They're better skilled and we can pay them better and give them better benefits. So in our modeling, this kind of trimmed down our fixed payroll costs by about 30%, but with better quality, better qualified, and better motivated and remunerated employees. So I would say that was our main takeaway from that process, and we saw that as an opportunity for sustainable thriving, not just short-term knee-jerk thriving. So I would say that was probably our biggest long-term opportunity that we've exploited, which was mainly focused on costs, because obviously revenues were limited in this type of situation like COVID. We don't have that much control of our revenues because it's dependent on others. But longer term, obviously we will have. But this restructuring of a hotel organization and its cost is going to be with us forever. So I have to congratulate the guys that work for me, because I always hire people that are smart, much smarter than me, so they make me look smart. So I look at it as a kind of a win.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. And I know when we had our discussion the other day, one thing that, a phrase that you used that I thought you might use, but you didn't, was COVID has basically been an enforcer of evolution. And
correct.
It's allowed you to make those changes that you probably needed to make in your business anyway. So out of adversity came opportunity. Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. So that was interesting from the point of view of the hoteliers. So now, one thing that's important to understand, and I think we are all aware of this, is the emotional, psychological scarring and damage that's been caused throughout this period of time. And when I spoke to Shane, it's something he was quite keen just to talk about. So Shane, directed at you, repairing the damage. So what do you feel that we in the hospitality industry can do to help improve mental health and psychological wellness?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for allowing me to participate with these other esteemed panelists and to speak to your attendees today. I think that the mental aspect is something that can be talked about for, you know, we obviously have a lot of healing to do, not just as individual countries, but as a world. But I think when you talk about, I was talking with Kevin when he invited me to be on the panel, and I was like, yeah, how this unfolded for me is I was excited. I had meetings in Spain, and I was on a plane to the United States last February to open our U.S. office. We have offices in India and the UAE, and I'm real excited. I'm coming home. We're setting up the offices, and then we had this, and it didn't seem real that we were having a pandemic, that suddenly you couldn't leave your home. I had to protect my parents, and you get bombarded with that. And then we had something crazy in here in the US. We had something called murder hornets, and then we had to deal with police riots and all things, grocery stores running out of toilet paper. And after a while, you just kind of get numb with everything hitting you. And you get to the point where if somebody was to knock on your door and say, hey, by the way, also there is an asteroid the size of New Zealand heading for planet Earth, you're like, hey, okay, we'll deal with it. You know, just add it to the pile, we'll deal with it. But we can't do that. We're going to need each other, professionally and personally. And we're just not going to be able, work's going to overlap with that. We're going to have to pay attention to our fellow coworkers, and we're going to have to say, hey, you have to understand that many families have been touched in many ways. We could ask every participant who's here today, how has this disease touched you? And everybody's going to have a personal story of survival and success, some pain, some sorrow. We all have to be there for each other. But my advice to everybody, before obviously, this is a chance for us to have a reset button on our technology and how we make money and how we service our customers and how we look at our customers. But one of the things you have to do, you have to get yourself in the right frame of mind. And one recommendation I have, and one of the things that I do often actually, is I sit down and I make a list of things that I'm in control of and things that I'm not in control of. And always my list of things that I'm not in control of are the things that are really the biggest on my mind, or maybe cause me the most stress. But they are things that I'm not in control of. So I learn how to release those and let those happen. And then I make my list of things I can control, things like I can have a positive attitude. I can do one nice thing for somebody today. I can check in on this employee personally, not just professionally, but personally today to see how they're doing. I'm in control of how much garbage I'm putting into my mind through social media and through the news, who have very skewed views. If you want to see true humanity and you want to feel uplifted, there's a website I suggest. It's very easy. It's just called projectcovid19.org. projectcovid19.org. There's stories from every corner of the globe that aren't about people fighting about wearing masks or who's going to get vaccinated or who isn't or whose fault or who isn't. They're uplifting stories about how people have helped each other and gotten each other through this. So yes, we're going to hit the reset button on our businesses. We're going to do great, but take care of the mental health, Kevin. Very important, and don't worry about those things you can't control. Fix the small things, one step in front of the other, and we get there.
Awesome. Thank you, Shane. And I think one of the most important things that for me personally during the different lockdowns I've been on is two things really. And I tell this to my team every morning when I get up, when I'm brushing my teeth, I look in the mirror and I say to myself, today is going to be a good day. And I say that 3 times, look at myself in the mirror, and I find that kicks me off to a good start. And the other thing that is important more than any is to be kind and considerate to everybody, and touch in with your family, touch in with your friends as often as you can. It's good for you, it's good for them, and it keeps you sane. So thanks, Shane, really appreciate that. And
Kevin, can you unmute yourself?
I know. Sorry, guys, I muted myself accidentally. The next question is going to be interesting. I think it's directed at the two guys that know an awful lot about revenue and an awful lot about demand and an awful lot about revenue management and skills. And this is something I think all hoteliers will be interested in. So right here, right now, because of lockdowns, because of changes, etc., demand is more unpredictable than ever. Okay, so how can a hotelier best prepare for a revival? Is that even possible? So I'd like to direct that question over to you, Amit. If you could share your thoughts on that, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kevin, and thanks everyone, and thanks to the audience as well. So, is it even possible? First and foremost, to answer that last question, yes, it's very much possible. I think our markets today are very dynamic. Market resistance are pretty much changing by the blink of an eye. And, we see as hoteliers, we are able to make qualified commercial decisions around shifting demand patterns, ideally ahead of the competition. And only those that come out in the best position will be, one, that you can capture that pent-up demand, and two, capitalize on that revenge travel once recovery takes shape. So just to prepare for a revival, it's just important, I think very critical to look at forward-facing data. Jonathan used the word that, as hoteliers, we've been traditionalists in our approach. So as hoteliers, I think we've traditionally relied upon all our historical analysis. So what does last year, what does previous to last year tell us? We know those established demand patterns and demand drivers really well. And, we always look at what has the year-on-year trend been, what is our holdings on the books in terms of what do we have in terms of reservations that have already been booked. And somehow we've always had that mentality to tweak this in some shape or form to be able to forecast a picture of what incoming demand is going to look like in our markets as well. And that's how we forecast. And that's how we look at our budgets year on year as well. But we also realize now that due to COVID, historical data is not really relevant. So it's more or less irrelevant. So revenue managers actually have a problem on their hands as to how best they can go in and forecast and budget for next year or for the balance of the year in 2021 as well. I think if we forecast on really looking at a manual analysis of trends and what the news is coming in, what's happening on a day on day in terms of trends, it's going to be very time consuming, and it's purely going to be reliant on guesswork. So key to revival is definitely looking at predictive market intelligence solutions that basically ingest details such as, intelligence on flight search data, hotel search data. They can reveal us the very first signs of which traveler is intending to travel to your specific market or to your city. They can look at segmenting that demand insight as well. And we can then begin to perhaps analyze that data to understand better which guests are wanting to travel, how long are they wanting to stay with you for, where are they traveling for? So, what's the kind of nationality that they're coming from and which airports are they coming? Because it's a very different space in terms of domestic demand patterns and international demand patterns. The better part of APAC is closed, whereas there are pockets in Europe and America where Shane is, which already are rebounding back and bouncing back with international. So I think that makes it very important, and you'll be able to have a very robust decision on pricing and promotions only once you look at forward-facing data from a demand perspective, and then capture your customers early on before your competition gets into the fray as well.
Great, thanks, Ahmed. And obviously, for those of you who don't know, OTA Insight does a great job in helping identify some of this stuff that Ahmed was talking about there. So thanks for that. Okay, Fabian, maybe you might have a contrarian point of view or a different spin on this question. Over to you, sir.
Okay, I wanna attack it from a different angle, right? and leave the audience with 4 points. I think if you're in an area where you have domestic demand, you're luckier than the ones that don't have, right? So we know, and there were studies by McKinsey done, that you will have drive, then you will have regional, then you will have international. So you kind of need to first of all look at your market and say, okay, what is actually the market that I can get? Domestic, regional, international, right? The second part is, I always like to say it takes 2 hands to clap, but it takes more to make music, right? You might remember when you were a teenager and you wanted to go out for longer and your parents just said no. And you kind of said, but why? And they just said, because. That's a bit what's happening with demand at the moment, because travel lanes open, travel lanes close. We went from very microeconomic to like city-wise macroeconomics, and kind of like now something in Europe will impact you in Bali, right? New Zealand lockdown will impact Australia. Australia lockdown will impact New Zealand, right? So you're all of a sudden exponentially driving that out. So when we then look at demand and we look typically further out and shorter in, your lead times will have to become shorter and shorter, right? So where you can put your money on is the short lead time. It's a more guaranteed. If you're a gambling man, that's where you want to put your money, because your odds of success are much higher than now thinking 90 days out, because we talked earlier about Christmas. God knows what's going to happen in Christmas, considering half the world goes into winter. We could have a 4th, 5th, 6th wave, and then everything that was built up is like a house of cards and just crashed down. And a lot of hotels have actually stopped forecasting outside of 6 weeks, because it's like you're like a puppy chasing your own tail over and over and over and over and over again. So if you're a hotelier, now is the time to be agile and experiment. And it's okay to change your mind, right? It's perfectly acceptable. If you went for a strategy today and want to do something and then shit hits the fan, no issue. It's okay to change your mind, because a lot of that stuff is out of your control. But you got to think outside the box. So this typical demand generation, let me send 10,000 emails out to people and then hope to God they all come back, is not going to work. So out with the old and just start with something new, experiment, get it right, do more. Don't get it right, tough luck, move on. But be agile, just get going. Just in the words of Nike, just do it.
Great, thanks, Fabian. So look, good feedback from both of you guys. I'd love to sit you all down in a restaurant one day and you guys chew the fat on this, because it's a fascinating subject. And of course, you're right. I think I think you can identify things to the best of your ability in the time that you're in, but when the time changes, everything can change with it. So it's kind of, you're in a constant state of flux. So I think what you said in particular, Fabian, was good. Like, suck it and see, try stuff, have a go. If it doesn't work, think again, try something else. You might hit upon a special sauce that works for a few weeks or months, and then you might have to, create another formula. But that's good advice. And it's difficult, really hard for hoteliers to get their head around this stuff, because things are changing so much. Brilliant. Thanks guys. Really appreciate that.
You're on mute again, Kevin.
Yeah, I know. I keep doing that. Sorry. Okay, so now we're going to move on to. Excuse me 1 second. Now we're going to move on to Vijesh. So Vijesh is with Oki, a wonderful upselling platform that's gone from strength to strength in recent years. Basically, Vijesh, have upselling patterns and behaviors changed during this pandemic period?
Thanks, Kevin, and thank you to everyone who's made the time to join our session today. To answer your question, as we all know, the only constant in life is change. While some things have stayed consistent, which in a positive way, there is also behavior that we've seen changing as a direct result of the pandemic. Now, the good news is that much of the change that we have seen has actually been to create new opportunities for hotels, at least specifically within upselling, in two main areas. So it's increasing total hotel revenue, as well as enhancing guest experience, an area that Jonathan earlier highlighted as being part of the three key important factors that he's looking into. So let me start with a couple of factors that haven't changed. Both pre-pandemic and now, upselling, of course, works best for hotels with multiple room types, as well as ancillary services. So to be a bit more specific, I highly recommend anyone who has at least 3 different room types at minimum. That's ideal. If you have less, different room types, you can't really change that. But keep in mind that as the market picks up, as we go towards revival, you will need sufficient inventory of the higher categories, because if it's something very unique and always gets booked up, you're going to see very low conversions. Another is to have at least a minimum of 8 ancillary services to upsell. This includes late checkout, early check-in, but also breakfast, parking, spa, dinner options. And to Fabian's point, you can really get very creative, test it out, and then if it doesn't work, you can just stop offering that and quickly replace it with something else. So it gives you a lot of options for testing and really trying to figure out what enhances your guest experience. Another constant we've seen is that even as demand has declined, the average guest spend on upsells has remained consistent. So what this means is that you can effectively drive incremental revenue using this upselling angle, even when you are only seeing city-specific or domestic demand. From the numbers we've seen, as long as you're seeing about 250 to 300 email addresses, that's a really good base to start for a very healthy pre-arrival upselling program. As for changes, we've definitely seen much shorter booking lead times. Demand is unpredictable. A lot of our customers are getting a huge number of on-the-day bookings or just one day before arrival. So usually while we try and encourage 2 pre-arrival emails, so you've got 2 chances to upsell, we've actually had to make it a very short average, like the day before, or bring it down to just maybe 1 email. Also, when we're looking at the data from 2020, we started seeing that room upgrades now comprise only about 60% of the total upselling revenue we're generating to hotels. The rest of it is all coming from ancillary services. So this shows that the needs of the guest is also starting to stretch to more than just rooms. And you now have this real opportunity here to capture a greater share of your guest's entire travel or holiday budget. A great one here is definitely in-room options. Anything that you offer in-room, like dining and so on, it definitely has a major uptake that we've seen right now. Back to you, Kevin.
Awesome. So I think the takeaway here is if demand may have changed and all of the world is a modeled place, but what hasn't changed is that if you've got an effective upselling program associated to your hotel, that's remained constant. So that's probably a really good thing for anyone listening to kind of get their head around. Upselling remains constant, even though demand and so on is all over the place. Brilliant. Thanks, Rajesh. Really appreciate that. So, guys, you may have noticed there's some polling going on. I should have brought your attention to that a bit earlier. So, you will see these questions coming up, and if you can answer them as you go, that'll be fantastic, and we'll share the results with you at the end of the meeting. So, great. Thanks, Rajesh. Okay, so now we're moving really into the whole revival side and getting stuck in. And Shane, I guess as the resident GDS expert, over to you. So globally, does GDS offer us any insights into the future recovery, and what do you think is the key to revival?
Yes. So I think, first of all, I will say that I'm a self-proclaimed GDS nerd. So I live and breathe this stuff. So yes, I'm obviously going to be able to see market recoveries through the analysis of the GDS production of our hotel clients. But I think the GDS itself is an obvious indicator of how the planet is recovering from COVID. We offer representation or we offer a full technology suite to our hotels. So it gives us a unique opportunity where we can see their GDS production, we can see their booking engine production, and we can see their OTA production. And we've always targeted as a company, we've always been focused on GDS. So we target, we're heavy in Dubai and Oceania, places that have lots of business. We have hotels in London. I'm expanding here in the US, and we're going East Coast, West Coast. Was our plan, but everything that we do is really centered around international travel. So when this happened and international travel stopped, we said, okay, we know we're going to have to pivot here, but let's see what's going to happen. And this amazing thing happened where all of our international hotels turned domestic in order to survive, if that makes sense. And when that happened, GDS started to pick up as there were more staycations or even, domestic business travel. And GDS has slowly been growing. And when you think of GDS, you don't only look at it just from the hotel side, you learn a lot looking at the airline side. And, Sabre is a big company. You can go ask about airline data. And there were some pretty good improvements coming in the airline side until July and August. We had this Delta variant. And the airline improvement has bumped down, but the demand isn't going down still for this domestic that was there for the hotels. It's quite a difference, and I know you can get stats from different places, but approximately, if you look at the different hotels are down 35%, similar to this time last year. Demand with Sabre, whereas air is down 65%. So that tells us, and that tells me and my company, that international travel has not happened. But we have seen this resurgence of new bookings through the GDS that's domestic based. So what can you do? Because, I told you a while ago, there's things that are out of control. You're right. We may have some more strains coming in the winter, and we may have some more lockdowns, but there's still, that's out of our control. But there's some things that we can do on the GDS to prepare, just some simple things. I'll give you just a few ideas just to be ready for when it comes back. Analyze consortia with whoever your provider is, and instead of looking at the big, worldwide American Express CWT, where you're going to have to pay $4,000 or $5,000 as a hotelier, look at your smaller local ones. Those are the ones producing anyway. They're much less expensive, some of them even free. So get in those consortia programs. Use this opportunity to audit your GDS listing, not what you think it looks like. You need to find out what travel agents see. What do they see when they see your hotel on the GDS, and is it actually optimized to get a booking? And then take that time to look at your pictures, look at your when you're auditing it, put fresh content in. Now, if you want to get an RFP invite, if you're a 4 or 5 star hotel and you need those RFP invites, you must have your hygiene sections filled out completely. So you need, if you don't know how to do that, you need to seek the advice of whoever your provider is, and just use this, that's part of the reset process, where we got to make sure that everybody is well aware of our property, and that we're saying all the right things we need to say for COVID, so that when this GDS business does pick back up, when this international travel does pick back up, we're gonna be one of the first to get bookings. You want to be there, and you want to be bookable.
Right. Thank you, Shane. And look, again, GDS, if you don't know what it is, or you do know what it is and you're not using it well, you should find out more. It's a fantastic tool to help you out there. So thanks, Shane. I appreciate that. I know you're passionate about that. So good stuff. Okay, so moving towards the last few questions for everybody. Jonathan, necessity is the mother of invention. Briefly, what key changes have you made to your product offering that you think is worth sharing with everyone?
Well, I think very much like the demand side of things, we have to assume what the consumer habits change is going to be. We don't know, we can only assume. I think a little bit on business though, we've made the assumption, not necessarily to product, but it will affect indirectly product. We assume that the big China outbound will not be back for a long time. I'll explain why. Number one is China has been very strict on their COVID policies, very strict on entering the country, which is fine, and that's been their way to handle the crisis. Two is it's boosted consumption in China for China. So there's a lot of money staying in China that wasn't previously in terms of tourism dollars. So we assume that big China, huge outbound, especially to our Southeast Asia properties, isn't going to be there in the midterm. Maybe it'll slowly come back, but there's not going to be a big door opening, we assume. So I think that's one thing. Second thing is we do believe there will be a large slice of our consumer base that will be concerned still about distancing, obviously about hygiene, about, let's say, selected isolation, for want of a better word. So where we see opportunities here is, I think someone touched on it earlier, we could see eventually and at last the rebirth of room service. Ta-da! Kind of a dying thing, that dying not because it was the consumer had stopped buying it. It was because we hadn't evolved it. So this is kind of forcing us to evolve to get that demand, to secure that demand on room service. Same with minibar, we believe, meaning room service and minibar are two things that have not changed in like 500 years. Next, we do also believe that people want more, let's say, a gentle workout amenity in the room, whether it be a yoga mat, a couple of dumbbells. That's something we're looking at adding, because people might not be comfortable going back to the gyms, so on and so forth. Also, of course, spacing and table layouts, that kind of thing. I think that'll be something we'll be doing too. However, we also do believe, and this is a sad story, but it's also an opportunity, our residential retention of spend will be greater, because unfortunately the pandemic has wiped out a lot of freestanding restaurants, bars, that kind of thing. So, supply has been reduced in many destinations. So hotels obviously not only have those facilities, but maybe some extra perception, hygiene, security. And obviously that will also help us collect greater domestic demand. And for me, the biggest learning from this whole process related to demand is how, in general, how ignorant we were of domestic demand potential. I say that myself because we've had to rely on domestic demand. So I think there'll always be a big focus now, or greater focus on this domestic demand, which there should have been, not in every location, but in most locations. And I think reverse facing, I think a lot of nationals have discovered their countries. Whereas before, maybe a Thai person would be thinking about 5 days in Japan or Korea for a quick trip, but they've been forced to discover their own country, same in Indonesia or Vietnam. So I think those two things mixed together will also create a greater demand bubble, and some people will be, initially at least, will be concerned about international travel from a health and safety aspect too. So I would say those are the things, the opportunities we're looking at a property level, and obviously dependent on the demand fluxes, which are pretty much out of our control.
Right, thank you. So yeah, I mean, I think that is I think when you think about places like Bangkok or, you know, a resort town, how many restaurants have been decimated? How many wellness places have shut down? Will they ever reopen? So it gives hotels a chance to focus on what they can do in-house, and also how they partner as well with other people and work together. So good stuff. Thanks, Jonathan. I appreciate it. Interesting your take on the China outbound, getting a bit of interest on the chat from that as well. Thank you. Okay, so Amit, back to you. This will be of interest, I think. What is the best way to approach pricing and volume strategies during this revival period, do you think? What's the best way to approach this or tackle it?
That's a great question, Kevin. So we know that, you know, due to the pandemic, hoteliers have obviously had to adapt to changes. Like Jonathan clearly highlighted from an operational perspective, I think those changes have also been within the rate and our promotional strategies, because in the last 18 months, hand on heart, I think the important and the first objective has been, let's get the bums in bed, let's drive volume. The rate can be increased later on. But I think what's also important is that we've seen that cancellation policies have become more and more flexible in order to attract those guests, whether it's domestic and from wherever they can come, whether it's drive-by, let them come in and experience the product. We've also, looking at the data internally, we've seen mobile reservations are accounting to far more overall bookings as well than desktop. Length of stay restrictions are utilized now to counter those significantly shorter booking windows like Vijesh and Fabian just mentioned as well. So staying competitive in a market that's constantly changing, for example, due to the restrictions is definitely going to get more and more difficult. It's also, I think, equally important that hoteliers at the very outset are confident of their product. You know, we should be confident about the product, our rooms, and the offerings that we have, because to drive rate year on year is a very difficult task. You know, whether we do our contracting exercise is just done once a year, our RFP is once a year, and if you already have the customer or the corporate clients or the leisure clients accustomed that, okay, this is the rock bottom price that I'm getting, it'll be very difficult to increase your ADR. So once you have that confidence, and once that is ticked, we can then begin to review if, depending upon the conditions of the market that we are operating in right now, how they should alter your promotional rate, your discount, and your cancellation of offerings as well. Should they offer bigger or smaller, perhaps length of stay discounts? What is my immediate competitors doing in terms of discounting? So I can kind of try and see, not necessarily replicate them, but at least understand their trends and their patterns. How do the current market conditions affect my competitiveness as well? You know, that will have a very big impact on my upgrade and my upselling policy as well. So getting an answer to these questions takes time. It's definitely very manual and very cumbersome. One of the things that we recently, you know, purely focusing on the recovery strategy, something that we recently introduced at OTA Insight is to have a very dedicated tab which is purely focused on rate strategy. And what rate strategy gives you is it gives a very high level overview of what are you doing and what your competitors' pricing and promotional strategies are over the next 30, 60 or 90 days. It also, you can see insights into the different strategies, whether what's your breakfast cost compared to your competitors, what's the length of stay discounts that they're doing, the semi-flex and non-restricted rates, and are they easy to use? And also you can then compare yourself with competitors on a different granular focus as well in terms of your room types. So is your room types competitive enough for that market to drive? We have Christmas, for example, and we have in some markets Diwali, which is going to be quite important. So are we protecting our potential constrained nights from now, or are we just purely focusing on that volume strategy that, okay, let's do it and let's look at what next year pans out? So it's really important in terms of, one, confidence in your product, and two, slowly start tweaking your controls and your cancellations so that you can start driving that pricing strategy upwards.
Great, thanks for that. Yeah, lots to think about. And I think in our discussion before, one of the things you mentioned was that who you used to think were in your comp set may not be in your comp set anymore, right? So
absolutely. I mean, we have, again, as hoteliers, we've always been accustomed to having a very static comp set, and that comp set can be defined, whether it's on a market performance, whether it's owner stipulated or management contract stipulated. But this is perhaps the right time where you go back and see who is really other players in the market that we've never really compared ourselves with, but are they cannibalizing our business on even one or two room nights or a particular segment that we've never really thought of optimizing as well.
Right, great, thanks for that, Amit, appreciate that. Wow, the time is flying, so we'll move on quickly. So Fabian, when we chatted, I think you you had quite an interesting point of view. So how important is the human-centric approach in revenue management, particularly during this revival?
Oh, it's absolutely pivotal, right? Let's backtrack a little bit. Revenue management-wise, we have been at it for roughly 30 years now, okay? And it was always system versus human. So there was always like, oh, we're so smart, we bring those analytics. Now, everybody talks about automation. But the human itself was always left out of it. So if the human was not good, you can optimize whatever you want, but if the human doesn't agree with it, or an ego comes into its way, it ain't gonna go nowhere, right? And so then COVID hit. And all of a sudden, the function that was supposed to bring certainty to uncertainty shit the bed, right? Literally. And everybody was sitting there and going like, crap, I've got 8 hours to fill. I normally move my rates up and down and toggle around some Excel sheets. And now I can't do that, right? And so then the first natural thing was like, okay, where to look? And you look for the systems, but the system was then like, oh, hang on 1 second. We don't know what's going to happen, so you're on your own, right? So the human was completely left out of the entire thing. And that's not a feeling anybody would want. That's like being told by the girl you love that she wants to stay friends with you, right? Ain't the prettiest thing in the world. Now, the second thing we need to understand is there's still systems. So monkey see, monkey do, okay? And unfortunately, there's so much stuff that the monkey doesn't see. Yes, granted, we have bigger monkeys, we have bigger monkeys, but during COVID, we blindfolded the monkey, right? And we said, dear monkey, now you have this, but I need now, again, the human to lead you. And the human had the issue that we went through a period of consolidation, and Jonathan said it in his comment earlier on around the part of it was cost driven, right? And I believe that a lot of other companies also took the first approach, let's stop the bleeding first and then get into a position where we can elevate it, right? Rightly or wrongly in some decision, I'm not going to comment on that. But we are left with something where less people have to do more. And you can agree, okay, I can throw automation on it. happy days. I can drive productivity. But now we have less skilled people having to do more complex tasks, right? So now you're asking my 5-year-olds to design a rocket launch, right? It ain't gonna be pretty. And so what we need to understand is that the human is a fundamental part of the optimization service. But that also makes it completely prone to mistakes. And revenue management before has put itself on this pedestal of this dark art for the selected few that is so great. And we have no talent, and anyways, hoteliers are down, right? But unfortunately, we now, and I think fortunately that's what we are doing, is we're taking the human in fully into it, because only a better human will make better decisions, will allow for better optimization, and therefore make your revenues go. But you will cock up a lot of times in between. And that is okay, because there's a lot of emotional, there's a lot of ego, there's a lot of other stuff. So is it absolutely going to be human-centric? 100%. Google is human-centric. Facebook is human-centric. Your phone is the most human-centric thing that you have out there, all designed to make you better. And we need to shift that mindset of saying our job in technology, in revenue management, is to help the human get better. Not to give them fancy graphs, not to give them fancy numbers, but actually tell them programmatically why and what it means. The analysis and interpretation is the biggest difficulty in our industry. I give all of you the same data set and I get 20 different outcomes, right? But the power of harnessing the top 5 and allowing that through a social proof to help the others drive forward. Now that is true optimization. And so I'm 100% for it. Count me in on this human centric.
Thanks, Fabian. Always good listening. I suppose in the final analysis, though, a fool with a tool is still a fool, right? So basically, get skilled up. Make sure you know what you're doing, and use the data. Make the best decisions you can. Try new things, and just be open to things. Thanks, Fabian. Really appreciate that. I've done it again. Finally, we'll bring in Rajesh. Now, can you share with everybody what upsell strategies are showing to be the most effective right now?
Certainly, Kevin. And I'm going to start with a point that Jonathan made earlier about offering, yoga mats and equipments in room. What's interesting is we actually had a customer whose hotels, a couple of them, were used for quarantine by the government. So what they did was they tested using our platform to segment just quarantine guests and offer them more services once the guest was already 3 or 4 days into their 14-day stretch. So they offer them yoga mats, roll-away treadmill or a stationary bike. They could even ask for a PlayStation. Some of these were at an additional cost, but offering it this way on demand, whether it's pre-arrival or in-stay, also meant that the hotel could manage to control the inventory of it, so they didn't need too many pieces. But they could also then take it back and make sure everything was cleansed and in line with health and safety requirements due to current situation. So I thought that was a great point that he brought up, and it's really about personalizing. So the most effective upselling strategy is really to think of guest experience as a commercial entity and how you can best leverage that. Jonathan also spoke about the in-room dining menu, right? So if you haven't had time to really work with your team to innovate that, that's actually perfectly fine. What you can do is just offer the most popular options from your F&B outlets in room. Like maybe you have a great high tea that usually has quite a bit of demand for, or a 3-course set dinner, or certain signature dishes. Keep in mind that with reduced seating capacity that we're all facing due to social distancing, your restaurants or in your outlets are becoming fully booked at half or even less of their usual capacity anyways. So by offering these to your guests, you're driving more F&B revenue to the outlets. But most importantly, your in-house guests who weren't able to get a reservation or won't be able to at the point of Revival and Arrival, at least they don't leave disappointed. They can still enjoy it in the comfort of their room. Some guests are going to enjoy that convenience, the more intimate experience. And it's also an alternate option to those who are still health and safety conscious, even though you can travel again. So whilst working towards Revival and Arrival, really think about the profile of your guests, what they're going to want. Is it speed, convenience, romance, fun? And really get creative with what you can offer in terms of in-room services. These can usually be done at quite low cost, but are really going to create that wow experience that a lot of travelers are going to start or really want right now. And another one I would touch upon is definitely the deeper integration of upselling into the rest of your hotel tech stack, so that you can really upsell to the guests using the right channels across their full journey with you. So don't keep upselling as an afterthought, don't use it in silos. We've seen that email works best for pre-arrival communication, for example, because the guest is done with the stress of the booking and is looking forward to their stay. So they're more inclined to open any email they receive from you and will browse in their leisure, right? Because it's coming towards their trip. But on the day of arrival, it's going to be much more effective to switch to messaging or SMS, because at this point in time, they're a little stressed, they're traveling towards the hotel, they're packing. So that's the best way to get their attention. But you also want to keep it really short and something that can be automated, and they can simply reply with a yes. So maybe, hey, do you need early check-in? Because we realize you're going to be arriving early. They just say yes or no. And then it's very easily and seamlessly processed. Once they are on premise, options that have to really be intuitive with your existing tech stack are most effective, because you can include it as part of your check-in device. During the stay itself, you can have it as a QR code on your TV or a placard by the phone and in public areas. And these then become the contactless and self-check service options that the travelers themselves are increasingly getting used to and looking for. We do have a lot of data and insights on what to sell, when, and via which channel. If anyone's interested, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or anyone from Oki, and we'll be very happy to share it with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Vijesh. So brilliant. Before we go on to a general discussion, I mean, it's great to hear from you all the different things that are you see making a difference or helping with that revival, and the things that hoteliers can do. And there's so much available. Really exciting to sort of understand. I mean, Jonathan, your journey has been to evolve your business and make some tough changes, but in the same token, make it more efficient and improve it. Obviously, from the revenue management perspective, you've got how do you deal with demand? What can you realistically do? How can you go around doing it? The comp set side of things, reevaluating. Great to know that from the upselling perspective, it hasn't changed. So if you're not upselling, then think about it. Likewise, Shane's passion with GDS and how the domestic part of the business of the economy is driving so many hotels, and I think that's been touched on as well. The Chinese outbound conundrum, will it, won't it? How much will that impact it? And then obviously the importance of domestic to the overall mix. So look, fantastic guys, really appreciate this. So we've been having such robust discussion that we've got one last question, and what I'd like you to do is, I guess in 2 or 3 points, succinctly answer it to the best of your ability from your particular, the angle of your business, okay? So this is about the future. So the future of hospitality is different things to different people. What are the biggest trends or the most important developments that you see in the future from your business perspective? So just a couple of points, guys, that you think will be the big trends or developments, and I'll start with you, Jonathan.
I think I would say dynamism. I think we have to be much more dynamic, and we have to be much more adaptable. we need to read the changes faster and act on those. I would say those are the two big things we need to be doing to, to chase this rebound and make sure the rebound grows.
Right. So those are very much behavioural changes. Okay, good stuff. Amit, same question to you.
I would take the perspective of our business, but I think some of the clear trends that we're seeing. One is there's a greater appetite for hybrid events. We're seeing this new demand of hybrid style events taking shape, and it'll continue moving forward as well. And I think as hotels, what we need to do now to attract this segment and be prepared for this is we need to start looking at maybe a virtual component in your RFPs as well. So Shane alluded to the RFP question. Maybe have a virtual component in your RFP. Second is, perhaps improve your digital infrastructure internally so that you are equipped to offer a faster bandwidth and there is no drop out. And accommodate flexible format as well in terms of video breakout rooms. Perhaps I attended a conference where they had a video breakout room for some of the virtual attendees last month, networking sessions as well. And the other second trend that we're definitely seeing is, specific to APAC, is the leisure versus business travelers. So that's going to continue. We are seeing that specifically in the US, there are indications that the summer leisure travel could return or perhaps exceed 2019 levels. So corporate travel is definitely going to not rebound till at least around 2024. And even when it does, the appetite for the business houses to spend that kind of money for allowing their staff to travel is going to be that much more limited. So let's shift our marketing to the leisure traveler in the markets where we operate perhaps. And that's the 2 points or 2 cents for me.
Right, thank you very much, Emmett. Okay, Vijesh, I know you've got a couple of quirky, interesting ideas.
Well, I'll stick to one right now. And I wouldn't say it's the most important trend, but definitely very interesting. And it's the concept of a workcation or work vacations, because working from home has led to this flexibility of basically working from anywhere outside the office. And some hotels have already tried to leverage this since late last year, where they were offering like work from hotel type packages. Generally, it was like a half-day use room restricted to office hours and weekdays and at a much lower cost. And there was definitely some interest in this. And it's mostly because people just really want a change of space, from being stuck at home, whether it's lockdown or just because of working from home. So change of space, some that's a necessity because you have a really important meeting and you want to make sure that, children and spouses don't turn up in the background. So there was some take up. But as markets now open up to domestic travel, possibly even international, the flexibility to work from anywhere means now people can travel and work from another place. So imagine just taking a trip to be able to work by the beach or a countryside that you love. Or even if you go on a business trip, maybe you want to stay longer in that city because it's your favorite city. This then gives a real opportunity because these are guests with definite disposable income who are willing to treat themselves. So this could open up a market for you, and anything you offer them that's going to make their stay more pleasant or lets them indulge in an effortless manner is going to see a very high take-up rate. What do you think, Kevin?
Well, when you told me about this, I got excited because I thought, you know what? As someone who goes away or likes to go away when he can, the idea of extending my staycation in a rental or in an Airbnb or in a hotel and work and play, it's good to me. I mean, at the end of the day, good value, good fun. So no, I think that's a great, and I'm sure Jonathan hopes it comes off as well. Fabian, over to you. What are your thoughts? What are the last, what insights have you got?
I think 2 parts. One is the short term and one is the longer term, right? I think the short term, I agree with Vijesh. We have a lot of the digital nomads, right? We just moved country from Singapore to Germany and we spent nearly 60 days in Airbnbs. And every week and a half, we would go through a new city so that the kids could enjoy it, I could do my work, but you had a change of scenery, right? But that also means that hotels now need to start offering different services to cater to that kind of stuff. We took Airbnb because it's much better for families than we can generally get from traditional hotels, right? Hotels, on the other hand, also have woken up to the fact that they're giving rooms now as apartments, right? So you take a 3, 6, 12 months lease, right? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with it because you're balancing of the short term and the long term, right? And I think that mixed service residences kind of approach will stick for us for much, much longer. On the pricing front, I think it's going to go absolutely haywire, right? If you look at how hotels normally price, you have this advanced purchase, then a sale, then maybe a flash sale, then an advanced purchase. Well, now everybody wants to pay for that flexibility, but nobody wants to pay extra for that flexibility. So where before you kind of got a discount for prepaying, people kind of go like, no, hang on one second, how am I going to do that? So we're quantum leaping into attribute pricing. Further down the line, immersive technologies are becoming bigger and bigger. VR, AR, haptic feedback devices, holograms are using more and more so that we can give hospitality at home. Like I always say when I talk to people, imagine you go to your favorite hotel and you will have your favorite massage over there. In today's technology, you can already have that massage at home in your living room, getting exactly that same feeling, but nobody is there. It's all through programmatic things happening. So I think this immersive approach of technology becoming more and more part of our life needs to happen and needs to extend into hotels, thinking how can I provide my hospitality service, but in a different locations than my own hotel. We've seen it with food deliveries and everything already. Restaurants have been at the forefront of it because they have to. I think now it's time for hotels to do the same thing.
Right, thanks for that, Fabian. Appreciate it. Good ideas here. So, Shane, the rock star with the Mo, if you'd like to take us out with your last thoughts, that'd be awesome.
I think I have something pretty fitting for the end. I think that first of all, I think that what all the panelists said is exactly correct. All great ideas and things we should focus on. I think history tells us, I think we have some historical events that we can look at that tell us that normal hotel operations are in our future, right? You can look at 9/11, which was supposed to really disrupt, even if it was going to be short time, it was going to disrupt how hotels worked and how business travel worked. And it didn't. It came back. The 2008 financial crisis, when the economies came down and travel reduced, and that was going to change the way travel happened, and we were going to all do Zoom, and we were going to all stay at home, and it eventually came back, not as quickly as 9/11. This is the biggest. I mean, we can't see. I don't think because we're in it, we can see how big and how important in history what we're going through is. But we will get back to that more traditional, what we remembered, hotel operations. And I agree with Fabian. From there, it goes on to the immersive technologies, and we continue to advance. But what we have to focus on now is the short term, just like everybody said. And we all have to be like Jonathan said, and I forget the exact word you used, but we have to be able to pivot very quickly in our businesses, whether we're providing the technology or whether we're the hotel. We all have to be able to pivot because we're all links in the chain, and we all need we're all part of making it work. So I'm excited about the future. We've learned so much through this, and learning from people like you. I'm just looking so forward to getting out on the road. I'm flipping a coin on whether I book WTM London and try and go for it this November and get to my first conference. But thank you for the opportunity, Kevin, and I appreciate the chance to speak.
No, thanks, guys. Really appreciate you guys joining us today and sharing your insights. I think that it's generally been a very very heartfelt and very really good response from you guys in terms of giving the hoteliers out there that are listening ideas, some hope and some inspiration going forward. So I really want to thank you all for that. Before we go, I've got a question that's been asked by the crowd, and I guess this is best directed to you, Jonathan, as a hotelier. The question was, how do you go around operating breakfast on the SOP when you've got a 2-meter distancing rules and so on and so forth? And what have you guys done in terms of that? Have you brought in schedules, or you've booked times, or how do you deal with that?
Well, basically, it depends on the size of the property, because if it's a larger volume property where you've traditionally been having a buffet type service is obviously different if it's a boutique property. I think our general solution for the larger properties was to extend the hours. So we'll extend the hours of breakfast. So because if you've got a 400 key property that is running at average 2 guests per room, but it's only running at 30%, that's still a lot of people. So we just extended the hours, and we let people know we've extended the hours so they can choose their breakfast time when they want, but also if it's not available when they do want to go, it's available later on. Because trying to offer a room service option for that number of people is not operationally feasible.
That'd be a nightmare, wouldn't it? You'd have people bumping into trays all over the place in the lifts, and oh gosh, it'd be brilliant. Thanks for answering that. So once again, guys, thank you so much for joining us for this session. To all of our listeners, still 220 of you out there, thank you so much for joining us today. We will be recording this and making it available in due course. But a special thank you to Jonathan, to Shane, to Amit, to Vijesh, and to Fabian from the 4 corners of the world, basically joining us on this call and sharing your insights. I personally want to thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. And for those people, all of the people who've helped make this happen behind the scenes, a big thank you from me and the STAAH team. And yeah, really, really good. Thanks, guys. And I'm sure one day we'll all meet again for a beer in person when this nightmare is over.